Hi, this is Heretical Sraffa. Scott from Heretical Sraffa here. Here we're going to continue with the video lessons from the PowerPoint presentation. The PowerPoint presentation is 106 slides, as you can see. Okay, so we got through the first 8 slides actually in the first lesson, where we went through in that first lesson. We went through and we developed the. Let me set the slideshow up here. We looked at the question of the theory of value distribution, right, from the two different perspectives of classical political economy and neoclassical marginal economics. Where we recall that we had said that neoclassical, that the classical theory is going to be based on commensurate labor time it takes to produce, so the focus is going to be on production. Neoclassical talks about value being based on commensurate quantities of exchange and consumption. We're not going to worry about the neoclassical economics problem from now on in this lesson. Okay, I'll put some other slides up that go there. Here we're going to focus the question on the classical political economy. Okay, so classical political economy is going to be the focus of this slide. It is important, the second bullet point, it is important to reiterate that the classical political economy approach is founded on the relations of production. It is important that we break this production process down. We call the span of time within which the production process takes place, we call that the round of production. And so the round of production is going to be the important conceptual category of the classical political economy approach. The round of production is going to be again take place in a period of time. In a single round of production, the inputs are combined at the beginning of the round, which we refer to as ex ante, and where an output emerges at the end of the round, which is what we call ex post. Okay. So here I draw the production process in general, and this is going to be the physical use value quantity relations, right? On the input side, we're going to have a variety of different inputs which are used to produce on the output side a gross output, which we're going to call Q. All right? Generally speaking, you're going to have 4 different inputs. You're going to have the land input, which is going to be so many acres per round of production. Then you're going to have the machine inputs, which are going to be so many units of machine per unit per round of production. The machine input are going to be is going to be referred to as fixed capital. And fixed capital, the point of a machine input is the fact that at the end of the round of production, you still have the machine left over for a subsequent round. So the idea of fixed capital, generally speaking, is going to be capital that's going to remain for subsequent production processes. It'll be depreciated, and the value transferred from a machine. This is the Marx's a particular approach to this question. The value that's transferred from the machine is the depreciated portion of that machine, which is transferred over to the price of the output produced. But the point is that the machine input is generally speaking going to remain for subsequent rounds up until the point where it breaks down, it's depreciated completely, or a new technology has emerged to replace it, right? And then we can see these relations, but at this point we're just keeping it at the level of just the one industry here and the one round of production. It's important to say these are the physical, all this is the physical quantities. The second input is going to be the raw material inputs. Now, the raw material inputs are going to be means of production inputs, like in that sense, they're like capital, like fixed machine inputs, I should say. They are capital. They're like fixed machine inputs here. They're going to be raw material inputs, but the difference is that the raw material inputs here, denoted by the letter A, are going to be completely exhausted in the round of production, right? So that all the raw material is physically transformed from one state, be it raw cotton, to a subsequent state, be it the yarn. And so the physical atoms, if you will, that go to the production of yarn are going to come from the raw cotton. My shirt is made out of cotton that was grown somewhere, right? That kind of relation there. And then the last input we consider generally is going to be that of living labor. This is going to be the direct producer, and which is going to be measured in so many units of labor per round. Again, these are going to be the physical units, and then the output is going to be the produced output there, right? Right on. So then we look at the ownership of these different inputs. The owners of these different inputs are going to receive distributed or remunerated revenues from the system. Okay, the owner of the land input is going to be the landlord. They're going to receive a distributive revenue, which we're going to call rent. The owner of the capital input, both the fixed capital and the circulating capital, we're going to denote as the capitalist, and the owner of the capital, being the capitalist, is going to get a distributive revenue in the form of profit. And the owner of living labor is the wage worker, and the wage worker gets the distributive revenue in terms of wages. Okay? There's our depreciation rate. Depreciation rate, which is usually denoted by lowercase delta, is going to be some number between 0 and 1, right? If it's 1, that means 100% of it is depreciated, and then you essentially effectively have a circulating capital model. The depreciation is going to be the piecemeal transfer of value of fixed capital to the product. Sraffa refers to the analytically in his book Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities. He develops the fixed capital framework within the general theoretical rubric of multiple product industries. Sraffa's book is divided into 3 parts. The first part is single product industries, which is the circulating capital model, where you have circulating capital or raw material inputs and living labor. Those are the first 6 chapters. Then part 2 is multiple product industries. Multiple product industries allows for the inclusion of joint products. It allows for the inclusion of fixed capital, and it allows for the inclusion of land, all 3 of which can be developed, and Sraffa treats them analytically on par with the joint production multiple product industries model. We'll talk about that. I'll do all of Sraffa's book in the subsequent lecture, guys, so don't worry about that. We're going to go through everything, including the archival evidence that went to create this. And then, of course, for raw material is going to be transferred over. Those are going to be your single product industries. Part 3, I should say, on Sraffa's book is switches in the methods of production. It's only 1 chapter, but there you get the reswitching phenomena that engaged the science in the 60s and the 70s, certainly, and into the 80s, actually, with respect to the phenomenon of reswitching or which were involved in the Cambridge Capital controversies. I'll do a whole lesson on that. We'll talk about the questionable of reswitching. Double switching is what Jeff Harcourt refers to it as, which showed significant problems with the neoclassical theory, right? And we'll go through and we'll look at that. Okay, so this is going to be our framework. All right, so that describes the general process of production. What we're going to do here is we're going to treat the production process in sequential steps, okay? The first way in which we're going to develop the production process is going to be in looking at what we refer to as an unassisted labor model, okay? Where the unassisted labor model basically employs this idea that in the production of the commodity, there is no means of production input, that it's all the product of pure unassisted labor, that the laborers go out and they find it or they get it. The example I have here is in the production of wild strawberries, quote unquote. This comes from a very interesting article that Malthus wrote in 1825, 2 years after Ricardo died. Remember, Ricardo died in September of 1823, and in 1825, Malthus publishes this really relatively little-known article. It's here at the bottom of the screen. That's called "On the Measure of the Conditions Necessary to the Supply of Commodities." It was published in the Transactions of the Royal Society of Literature of the United Kingdom in 1829, which the Transactions had many different entries, not all economic entries, but in any event, I have my copy of it here. All right, so if you were to click on, make sure I do this right, okay, if we were to click on to this, for some reason it wants my thing, yes, you're going to be able to get the slide, why is it not going? Here it is, there it is. Okay, you're able to get the article, all right? That's not how I wanted to come out, but there it is. Okay, this is, apologies, this is my annotations on it. I apologize for those who want clean copies. You can find this online, okay? Just Google search. I think I got this from Google Docs. Google Books, right? It's out there. It's in the public domain. for the citation that I had there. And then here we have the idea. Sraffa Malthus refers to these as appropriative industries. Okay, let's begin with a simple case. We know that there are some commodities. Let me actually put this up here. All right, we know that there are some commodities. Here we are, here. Okay, on the measure of value commodities, boom, 1825. Okay, there are some commodities that have been the result of appropriative industries, which are not only obtained by immediate labor alone, but are brought to market immediately, and therefore no profits are concerned. Actually, this is where I kind of differ with Malthus, because the way I'm presenting it, it's going to be the wild strawberries industry, but I am going to associate it with a profit factor. Really, it's going to be the rate of exploitation factor. I'll explain that, but I am going to put that on here. Malthus doesn't. Okay, so he's going to have pure unassisted labor with no profit factor. We're going to use that for the gold sector. We're going to adopt this appropriative industry for the gold sector when we follow Malthus's assumption that gold is the source of money, which is going to be the product of unassisted labor of workers on the seashore just finding the gold, right? Or the silver is what he says. So there we do not assess a profit factor to it. But for our wild strawberries industry, we're going to assess a profit factor. But still, the point is that I get the framework from Malthus. All right. And generally speaking, I think that there's been a lot of I think Malthus gets somewhat of a raw deal in certain ways. I'm not going to waste time in this slideshow about that. I'm going to do a whole nother a lecture on Malthus. I have a lot to say on Malthus. But in any event, that's our unassisted labor model. Okay, so we're going to have a wild strawberries model where just pure living labor goes out and picks the wild strawberries. Okay, and so, but we will assist a profit factor to that. That's A. And B, and these A and B are going to be in this slideshow. B, we're going to assist the labor by having a one commodity corn model. And in a one commodity corn model, we're going to have corn as seed. So we have a means of production input. The corn model comes from Ricardo's essay on profits in 1815. Here I hyperlink folks to the online Library of Liberty. Okay, which is here, right? I had said that the online Library of Liberty was a great resource for us to use. There we go. All right, was a great resource for us to use. This is going to be the essay on profits. The note on essay on profits are going to be the notes that Sraffa writes. All right, and so here's your 1815. These are all those different authors in 1815 that wrote on rent that I put in that previous slideshow on the timeline there. You can see it there. Okay, and then you have Ricardo. All right, and so Ricardo comes in 1850. This is a wonderful table that he has on showing the rent, his theory of rent, his diminishing marginal returns theory of rent. He was one of four in 1815 to have arrived at that. Okay, but it's there. All right. We'll put this down here, okay, and then we have our model here, okay, and so that's going to be our essay on profits. Now, the unassisted labor model and the one commodity corn model are talked in this essay. The two commodity wheat and iron model, which I've done some slides on, some presentations on, which appears here in Sraffa, is going to be in another slideshow altogether. There, okay, in each of these cases we'll assume no money first, and then we're going to assume a money sector, and our money sector is going to be the unassisted labor that I spoke about earlier. The assumption is going to be gold or silver produced on the seashore. The methodology of the exposition will assume the following. We're going to have a physical structure production, again for A, unassisted labor, a value structure production, A, for unassisted labor, a money structure production for A, unassisted labor, and then the same three for B, the one commodity model, and C, the two commodity wheat and iron model, okay? And we'll go back and we'll talk about that. So we begin with A, the unassisted production model. This is going to be wild strawberries. So there's our single round of production. Okay, in our single round of production, we have ex ante, the input of labor, 1 hour of labor, we're keeping it simple, is going to produce ex post the quantity of strawberries. It's going to be 3 units of strawberries. And you can see how I'm using my my X1 is the quantity, 1 is the wild strawberry industry, and the wild X1 is thereby the quantity of wild strawberries, right? We have a physical transactions table where we're going to put the physical relationship between the living labor added and the resultant net output together. Okay, read Passanetti's lecture on the theory of production, where he goes through and does the physical transactions table, the value input output table. This is the referent that I'm using here. Okay. Now, one of the things we're going to be looking at, and is really important for this, for the entire classical approach, as far as I'm concerned, certainly the way in which I'm presenting it here, that I have discerned that we're getting from the approach as evidenced by Sraffa. One of the important relations that we're going to be looking at here is the congruence between the living labor added and the net output produced. This congruence is going to again come back to the question of the Newton interpretation and the monetary expression of labor time. I'll come back and refer to that when it's relevant. Again, I got a whole other lesson that's going to talk about some of the debates in Marxian transformation problem theory, right? But the idea there is similar. For those who might know the new interpretation, it's a similar idea that you have the quantity of living labor is going to be congruent with the quantity of newly produced net output. Here we have a congruency relation because there's no value. We haven't commensurated anything yet, so there's no price associated with the wild strawberry. There's no wage associated with the wage yet. Okay, but what we have here is a congruency. So the congruency is going to argue that there's a congruent relationship between the quantity of living labor added and that with the quantity of net output produced. That's going to be related to the congruence, to the equality that Sraffa gives in production of commodities by means of commodities, where in section 10, he normalizes the quantity of labor for the entire industry. Now, of course, he's doing a multi-commodity model, not a one-commodity model, but what Sraffa does is he normalizes the labor of all the industries in the economic system equal to 1, and in paragraph or section 10, and in paragraph or section 12, he normalizes the price of the entire range of net output aggregated together also equal to 1. And so there you have that equality of the living labor added with the value of the net output. Again, for Sraffa, it's a strict equality because he sets the numbers, he sets the values equal to 1. He sets it to one scalar value with no units. That's his way, his method of exposition, but it's essentially the same relation. I have the page here where here you can see in paragraph 10, there's the living labor is set equal to 1, and then here in paragraph 12, the value of the net output is equal to 1. We're going to go through production of commodities in detail, guys. So we will talk about this, but this is where this particular normalization that I'm doing here at the unassisted labor model, I'm taking it back, comes in. So we write a price equation, okay? And so here we have our price equation. On the right-hand side of the equal sign, I have the value of the wild strawberries. The Y is the net output of wild strawberries. There is no means of production input, so the net output is equal to the gross output for the unassisted labor model, okay? In the one commodity corn model, we're going to see the difference. In the unassisted labor model, the gross output is equal to the net output because there are no means of production requirement. The net output is purely used. It's consumed or whatever. It doesn't enter as a means of production anywhere. And that's it. It's a non-basic, right? In Sraffa says. But we have here on the right-hand side of the equal sign, I'll go to this first equation here. The right-hand side of the equal sign, we have the price of the wild strawberries. Remember, good 1 is wild strawberries. The price of good 1 times the net output of good 1. And the superscript E refers to the price at the various regimes of functional distribution, where the regimes of functional distribution are here going to be expressed in terms of the ratio of distributive shares. I'm going to come back in one of the slides below and speak more about the definition of the wage share. But the chase to which we cut, we're going to now, is going to be the idea that as per the normalization procedure, there is a value added in the economic system, and that value added in the economic system is going to be subject to distribution, and that it's going to be distributed from the wage to the profit. We're not going to worry about rent in this situation. We're abstracting from that. We're going to say that the distributive revenues are going to strictly be that of wage and profit revenue, and that the price form for both the price of good 1, P1 E sub superscript E, as well as the wage rate, W superscript E, that those prices are going to change, ostensibly change, with changes in distribution. In a one commodity model, the change is not so evident, right? I mean, we're going to talk about that here, but the idea here is that the price form is a function of income distribution, right? And that's important, that prices change when we change distribution. And that was the whole point of criticizing Marx and his transformation procedure, right? That when you have the distribution of capital according to the general rate of profit, it no longer equals to your labor value. We talked about that in the previous video where we looked at the debate between Ricardo and Malthus, but between labor bestowed Ricardo and labor commanded of Malthus, and how this relation shows up there, and how that led to the rejection of the labor theory value. But in my opinion, baby's thrown out with the bathwater, and instead of fixing the problems, it was thrown out because of the political inconvenience of an exploitation theory of profits. Right? The wealthy don't want to think that their revenues coming from the extraction of unpaid labor from the working people that they exploit. They want to think it comes from their own brilliance, right? And so they have a lot of paid henchmen at Harvard, et cetera, that are going to, corroborate that. I remember Mankiw. I'll talk about Professor Mankiw at some point, but I remember at a conference in 2015, January in Boston, he spoke about how much he loves the rich. All right, that's on him. Everything I talk about Mankiw is stuff that he said. Okay, so I encourage you, and yeah, he does, and they love him, and so that's kind of. So what we have to do is we have to think. Well, let's think scientifically here, not just in terms of self-interest. But in any event, I don't want to digress. So here, then we have this. So on the right-hand side of this equation, I have the price of the growth of the output, and on the left-hand side of the equation, I have the price of the input, the labor input. Well, that's our only input, right? We don't have means of production. This is a pure living labor, unassisted labor model. Here we have the living labor input cost. This is the wage rate times the quantity of labor necessary for the production of wild strawberries, is multiplied by the profit factor. Here the profit factor is expressed as 1 plus the rate of exploitation, or the rate of extraction, or the ratio of distributive shares. If people have a problem with the term exploitation, fine, then just think of it as just the ratio of distributive shares, right? The ratio of the wage share over the profit share. I encourage people read Joan Robinson's second edition of the essay on Marxian economics. She wrote that in 1942, and there's some really interesting marginal notes Sraffa has on his copy of Robinson's essay on Marx. And for anyone who goes to Cambridge and to the Wren, you should definitely fetch that volume. I'll give you the site in the dialogue box or below. But the point is, in the second edition of that, I think in 1968, I believe, she writes a really nice introduction to that volume, and has a really cogent way to explain the idea of the rate of exploitation and the ratio of distributive shares. I quite like that entry, and I encourage people to read everything. All right, so we come here. All right, so we divide everything by the net output, and basically all I'm doing here is I'm writing my price equation. Remember, the top equation is going to be the price equation when we have the levels explicit. In this second equation here, the second and third are going to be variants of it. Is going to have it when you have it expressed in terms of the direct labor coefficient. And the point is, on the right-hand side now, you just have the price. So this is your price. right? And so we have here this and that third equation. We see, and we see here that the price is going to be equal to the wage times the direct labor coefficient multiplied by the profit factor, which is this rate of exploitation or ratio of distributive shares. I have my rate of exploitation or ratio of distributive shares here in this graph. I put it in quadrant 2, where in quadrant 2 the vertical axis is going to be equal to the wage share. Okay, so it's going to be the distributive shares expressed in terms of the wage share. So the maximum value, which is 1, that's when wages are completely paid. Passanetti's complete wage rate, that is to say, all the net output goes to the workers, down to the situation when the wage share is 0. Here, as the wage share moves from 1 to 0, wages fall and profit arise. In an unassisted labor model, there is no rate of profit. The rate of profit is undefined because there is no capital stock to put in the denominator. Hence, what you have here is the pure rate of exploitation. All right, and so that's here. And so as the wage share falls from 1 to 0, the rate of exploitation goes from 0 to infinity. That's going to be here. And so what that means is that the distributive variables, in this case the wage rate and the rate of exploitation, are going to have associated with it a pure wage regime value and a pure profit regime value. I should say the price of the wild strawberries will too, strictly speaking, but we're assuming here that the wild strawberries price is going to be equal to 1. The way I'm drawing it here, so we're going to set that as the numeraire in order to draw this particular relation. But if we were to set the wage as the numeraire, which we could easily do, then it's the price of wild strawberries that would increase. But instead of decreasing as the wage does, the price of wild strawberries, if wages is the numeraire, is going to increase infinitely. Right? It's going to be what we can see as labor commanded. It goes back to the Malthusian, or I don't want to call it Malthusian, I'll never say that again. The Malthus' a theory of value of labor commanded. And the Malthusians are these guys that read into the population dynamic and Malthus. And no, I'm not no associated with that. Malthus's labor commanded notion is going to be the price, in which case the price of wild strawberries would vary, right? Because you're holding the wage rate constant. It's a constant wage of a decrease in absolute quantity, and that explains why the labor commanded price of wild strawberries increases without limit, right? Because you're taking your wage down to 0. But the point that I'm making here is that the changes in distribution already become evident here, even at this this pure unassisted labor model, right? So we're going to go through, we're going to develop our value structure. So again, our methodology, physical structure production, value structure production. This is going to be our value equation for our wild strawberry model, okay? Here I'm going to express this, I'm going to solve this in terms of the complete wage rate and the complete price of strawberries in order to illustrate this, but it can be for all of them. But the simple case we're going to have here is going to express it when wage share is equal to 1 and the rate of profit is equal to 0. We're going to define the unit price here as a ratio of numeraire per unit of the good in question. We're going to measure the numeraire here generally as the Greek letter nu. It looks like the letter V, but it's going to be the Greek letter nu, which is going to stand for numeraire. And the quantity of numeraire commodity is going to be accordingly measured as X sub nu. So the unit price of wild strawberries is going to be measured in so many units of nu, or numeraire units, per unit strawberry. The way in which and the unit wage rate is going to be expressed in so many numeraire per nu per unit labor, right? And so you're going to have the same numerator. This is why when you're looking at the value form, it's not a common denominator, really you get a common numerator. All right, so the numeraire in the unit price of the expression is going to be the common numerator that you're going to be using to multiply by the different quantities in order to render these physical magnitudes commensurate in value. That's the whole point, right, of a theory of value. The way in which we do our notation for the P, for the price of strawberry here, the unit price of strawberries, the first subscript is going to be the good whose value is measured, right? Going to be, in this case, going to be the strawberry. Marx calls that the relative form of value. And the second subscript is going to be the commodity that does the measuring, right? It's going to be the equivalent form of value in Marx. It's going to be our numeraire. So we say here that P superscript 0, 1V, what that is going to be equal to so many numeraire units per unit of good 1. What this P superscript 0, subscript 1 new, I called it V, I should call it new, says it's going to be the price of good 1 measured in so many units of numeraire when the regime of distribution is at the wage share equal to 1 and the rate of exploitation and or rate of profit equal to 0. So the superscript denotes the level of distribution, where the 0 means the 0 profit scenario or the complete wage scenario. The unit complete wage rate is going to be W superscript 0 numeraire, right? Or W nu 0 superscript there is going to be equal to so many numeraire per unit labor. When wages are remunerated at a wage share regime where unity is maintained, then wages are equal to productivity. Passanetti calls this the complete wage rate. Wages are completely paid such that the entire net output can be exhausted by the wage payment, right? That's going to be the idea there. There'll be as many price systems as there are numeraire, and each price system is expressed in the same numeraire. I mean, you can have an infinite number of price systems. So let me be clarified. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be developing our numeraire first in terms of our real sector. So we're going to have wild strawberries as a numeraire, and we're also going to consider when labor is a numeraire. And so that's the idea here. Now, when wild strawberries is the numeraire, the same numeraire is going to be used to express all prices. You're going to have the wild strawberry price of wild strawberries and the wild strawberries price of labor. Well, the wild strawberry price of wild strawberries is by definition equal to 1, because 1 unit of wild strawberries exchanges for 1 unit of wild strawberries, right? And the wild strawberries price of labor is going to be the quantity of wild strawberries per unit labor. Similarly, on the labor as a numeraire, you're going to have the labor value or the labor price of wild strawberries or the labor value of wild strawberries, and you're going to have the labor value of labor. The labor value of wild strawberries is going to be equal to so many units of labor per wild strawberry, and the labor value of labor is going to be so many units of labor per unit labor. When labor is a numeraire, you set the wage equal to 1. There's your labor commanded, and the prices unequivocally increase as the wage goes down, because you're setting as unity a price, the value of which in absolute term decreases, which means relative to all the other prices, they increase. Right? That's going to be the labor commanded standard of value, right? And then the 0 superscript refers to the particular regime of functional distribution, where the 0 refers to the situation when labor receives remuneration in accordance with its own productivity, and an asterisk, we'll talk about that having later, refers to the case when labor is remunerated or paid less than its own productivity. Hence, in general, the productivity of labor is going to be equal to the complete wage rate, expressed in terms of whatever numeraire, and that's going to be greater than the actual wage rate or the incomplete wage rate, which is going to be the wage rate associated when the wage share is less than unity and a rate of profit arises. Okay? This is the matter of distribution, which we return to below. Bueno, your unit complete wage rate, again, is unit net labor productivity. It's going to be equal to the productivity of labor. That was coined by Professor Passanetti, Lectures on the Theory of Production, page 121. I have an article that's coming out this year that develops some of this. It's a symposium on new developments in Sraffa scholarship. And the paper I have looks at this configuration of exchange, etc., and it explores that. I'll make sure that people have access to that. Changes in distribution of income are defined as reductions in wages from the maximum value of labor's productivity to the minimum value of nil. There you can see what we mean when we're talking about our changes in distribution. Pure wage remuneration, the wage is equal to labor productivity. 0 wage remuneration, the wage rate is equal to 0. It takes to the question of the lower limit of 0. So now I'm going to set up my scenario. So I'm going to come back to my equation. All right, so here. All right, so now I take my equation. I'm going to be using this form of the equation here, I believe, or maybe this one. All right, I have to look to see, but I'm going to use this equation here, and I'm going to solve the equation. I think I do this top one. I think I keep it really simple. Okay, is that we solve that equation when wild strawberries is a numeraire, and we solve that equation when labor is a numeraire. Okay, and so that gives us 2 different prices, or 2 different sets of prices. Okay, so yeah, I do the first one. Okay, so here I set the price of the wild strawberries equal to 1, and we just, so this is our equation. All right, so I get these. This is going to be the equation. So 1 unit of labor times the quantity, times the wage rate, plus expressed in wild strawberries, plus the extraction factor. Again, the profitability in the unassisted labor model is equal to the quantity of wild strawberries times the value of wild strawberries. Okay, go through and then you can solve that. This is going to be the general equation for the wage when the price of wild strawberries is equal to 1 across all regimes of distribution. Okay, so it's going to be 3 units of wild strawberries per unit of labor, multiplied that denominator here, multiplied by 1 plus the rate of exploitation, right? When the rate of exploitation is 0, right? That's going to be the point here. The zero profit relation is correct. Okay, so that then the E falls out, and then we have our complete wage rate, which is equal to 3 units of wild strawberries per unit labor. It makes complete sense. If for 1 hour of labor we produce 3 units of wild strawberry, then the complete wage rate is going to be 3 units of wild strawberry per unit labor, right? Complete productivity is equal to the wage rate, and the price of the wild strawberry is 1. Now, when you set whatever numeraire you set, the definition of the numeraire is that it's going to remain 1 no matter the distribution, right? I'll come back to this in a minute. If we take the same relation and instead of using the wild strawberry as a numeraire, we make wages as a numeraire here. Okay, now we make that equal to 1. This then becomes your labor value. Okay, this is going to be the labor value of the wild strawberry, which is going to be equal to 1 plus the rate of exploitation over the coefficient units of labor per unit of wild strawberry. You can see that the units are reciprocated. All right, and you can also see the coefficients are reciprocated, that the complete wage rate is equal to the reciprocal of the value of the commodity. All right, let me say it again. The complete wage rate in terms of wild strawberries is the reciprocal of the labor value of wild strawberries. Right, they're going to be reciprocals of each other, both in terms of quantities, 3 1/3, as well as the units, quantity wild strawberry per unit labor, quantity of labor per unit wild strawberry. And that's what we have here. Again, we come when the wild strawberry, when the rate of exploitation is equal to 0. All right, so this then is going to give us the price of the wild strawberry, which is going to be the labor value of the wild strawberry, which is going to be 1/3 units of labor per unit, good 1, and the value of wild strawberry is going to be equal to 1. I can already see a mistake here. Let me change this. All right, this is going to be, I think I take this is here. All right, should be equal to. Whoops. All right, let me see what we got. It's not going to be multiplied by that. There are going to be different ways we express that. It's going to be equal. Bueno. Okay, good. I'm glad I saw that. I'm trying not to make mistakes. If you find any mistakes, guys, by all means, let me know. I don't want to make these things. I want to make it clear and not have any mistakes. Okay, so now what we can do is we can develop this thing called what I call the configuration of exchange. This is related to my paper in the research in the history of economic thought and methodology here, where we start looking at the question of the configuration of exchange. Now, here we have the idea that the price is not just any one thing. Right? When they say, what's the price of the good? Well, it's not just a thing. It's a relation. All right? That instead of one price, we have, instead of one relation of exchange or one price, we have a configuration of exchange. That the price is a configuration. And that's what I try to show here. So on the first column, I put the wild strawberries equal to a numeraire price. Again, this is all going to be for the complete wage rate for illustrative purposes so that you can see very clearly what's happening here. The same relations are going to hold as we change our distribution. We'll be able to show you that. So your wild strawberry is equal to the numeraire is going to be on the first column, or the wild strawberry price of wild strawberry is equal to 1 with no units. Well, now you can see what's happening with the units, right? What's happening is that just like any unit price, the numerator is common, the common numerator of the numeraire. When wild strawberries is the numeraire, it's going to be so many wild strawberries per unit wild strawberry. There's that own exchange. So the units cancel out and you set that price equal to 1, and then the wage rate is going to be so many units of wild strawberry per unit labor. In this particular context, it's going to be 3 units of wild strawberries per unit labor. You're at your complete wage remuneration. Your wage share is equal to unity, and your exploitation rate, or your profit factor is equal to, your profit rate or exploitation rate is equal to 0. Okay? Then you're going to have, at the second column is going to be labor as a numeraire, or labor as a numeraire is going to be the labor value of the commodity. Here, it's going to be the labor value when the wage share is equal to 1. There's your labor embodied, right? That's your traditional labor theory of value, in the sense that you say the micro labor theory of value, where in this micro labor theory of value, you have your labor contained or your labor embodied. That's conducted at the level of analysis of volume 1 of capital. Even though Marx does look at distribution, he just assumes that the value is going to hold there. I'll explain more of that in the chapter on in a lesson, some lessons I'm going to do on Marx. But the point is that that's our labor bestowed. Right, with the classicals are called labor bestowed, and then of course the wage rate is going to be equal to 1. And there again you can see the labor per labor cancels out, and rendering the price of the numeraire commodity equal to unity with no units. All right, that's going to be our configuration of exchange. So the price form is going to be this configuration. And I think a more robust and rich way to think about the price form are these reciprocal relations, not just a one-way relation, but a reciprocated relation of exchange. I think makes a lot more sense in how we understand the nature, certainly of the wage form, right? And I think that what's happening in the real world out there with respect to workers not getting wages, man, it's a power relation. It's why, all right. It's not because workers ain't as productive as they were. We're damn productive. We've been productive. It's a question of how we get paid, and it becomes a property relation and a power relation, and things such as that's not an economic relation that falls from the sky, right? Anyway, I don't want to go off, right? So this then is going to be the price, and it's easy to. I think a good way to conceive of this is to conceive of it as that matrix, right? And so there, boom. If you look at it as a matrix, right? Again, each of the columns are going to be their own sets of the prices, right? But if we write it in a matrix in this manner, you can say, well, the principal diagonal are going to be the own prices, are going to be equal to 1, right, across it. And this is true for the end commodity case. And the off diagonal elements are going to be reciprocated values, reciprocated both in terms of the units as well as the quantity. So the complete wage rate, and the wild strawberries as a numeraire complete wage rate, is going to be 3 units of wild strawberry per unit labor, whereas the labor value of wild strawberries is going to be 1/3 units of labor per unit wild strawberries. Again, the pure regime of remuneration. So that's how we are going to express our price. And we're going to understand the price form in terms of these different configurations. And we can see this at the most simple case of unassisted labor. I think that's an important point to emphasize. Okay, this is the general configuration of exchange where alpha sub E is going to be that coefficient, the 3, right? And there that's in this one. So this is going to be that coefficient. Sraffa writes in Production of Commodities, he talks about the values spring directly from the methods of production and productive consumption. I'll talk more about that. But this is going to be the value that's sprung. Right, and so here we have the sprung value alpha sub superscript E. Now that means that the values that are so sprung are going to change when we change distribution. Right, that's exactly the point. As the wages go down, the wild strawberry price of labor decreases from 3 units of wild strawberries all the way down to 0 units of wild strawberries. That's the whole point. Right, and so too for the configuration on the labor side of the coin. I'll come back to this, but I do want it to at this point to introduce the notion of the configuration of exchange, of setting up our prices of our commodities in this manner, of conceiving of the own price as unity on the principal diagonal, and seeing that the off diagonal elements are going to be cross prices of each other depending on whatever numeraire we choose. That I think gives us a much more robust and cogent and holistic way in which we can frame the value relation. That we get from Sraffa, guys. I mean, that's an amazing development of the way in which we understand value distribution that Mr. Sraffa gives us. And as he says on his book, it's a prelude to a critique of economic theory. Well, it's time we take that prelude forward, okay? All right, so then we have our input-output table, right? Before we had arrived at, we had developed the transactions table here. Okay, for the transactions table is a physical transactions table. We have physical quantity of living labor, physical quantity of the wild strawberry produced net output. We arrive at the value relation. Okay, we're going to conceive then of the value of each of these goods in whatever numeraire we choose. Okay, that gives us our input-output table. All right, and our input-output table is going to be here. So when wild strawberries is the numeraire, the price of wild strawberries is equal to 1, and the wage rate is equal to, and this is going to be the complete situation I'm continuing with, is going to be equal to 3 units of wild strawberry per unit labor, and when labor is a numeraire, the reciprocal is going to hold. Okay, so you have the wild strawberry input-output table. Here you have the value added by living labor. You have 3 units of wild strawberry per unit labor multiplied by 1 unit of labor. The quantity of labor cancels out. Here you can see why I'm putting the dimensions at the end of the number, so you can see the canceling out of this, and that leaves us with the value of 3 units of wild strawberries is equal to, on the output side, the price of wild strawberries, which is 1 with no units, times the price times the quantity of wild strawberries, which is 3 units. There, 3 units of wild strawberries, the value added on the labor side is equal to 3 units of wild strawberries, the value of the net output on the output side when wild strawberries is the numeraire. There you have paragraph 10 equal to paragraph 12. Same thing holds when labor is a numeraire. When labor is a numeraire, we set the price of labor equal to 1, which means on the input side, you're going to have 1 unit of labor, and the labor value of output is going to be 1/3 unit of labor per unit of wild strawberry. When you multiply that by 3 units of wild strawberries, the 3 cancels out, and the units of wild strawberries cancel out, leaving 1 unit of labor. Here on the labor as numeraire input-output table, 1 unit of wild strawberry, 1 unit of labor is on the input side, which is the value of living labor, is equal to 1 unit of labor on the output side, which is the value of wild strawberries when labor is the numeraire. Okay, so this is the end of the second part of this video. Okay, the next part of the video, we're going to introduce the money sector with unassisted gold, and there we're going to start looking then at some of the debates that were happening in the correspondence between Malthus and Ricardo. Okay, right on. We'll see you this next time. Okay, peace.